Hey there, and welcome to Season 4 of Stories Unveiled, the podcast where we believe every story has the power to inspire, connect, and transform. Whether it's through the mundane moments or the life-altering tragedies, we highlight God's story on display in our lives. Each episode, our guests get real and dive into their own personal journey, where we hold hardship in one hand and hope in the other, and we explore where Jesus is in the messy middle. I'm Ashley Sears, and I'm so glad you're here. Hey, it's Ashley here at Stories Unveiled. Before we dive into this episode, I want to personally invite you to our upcoming annual Fall Women's Conference. This is your chance to experience the power of real, life-changing stories, just like the ones here on every episode, brought to life in person. Join us for a full day of hope, inspiration, and connection, featuring incredible regional and local speakers and a moving keynote session, plus amazing uplifting worship. Connect with amazing community partners and browse our curated vendor booths. Don't miss this opportunity to gather, grow, and be encouraged by stories of hope at this fall's Stories Unveiled conference. Register now at storiesunveiledconference.com. We can't wait to see you there. This podcast was a live recording of a streamed video chat. Due to streaming variables, please excuse any inconsistencies in this recording. Miranda Newell is a mom of 2 adult kids and is passionate about recovery work. After starting her substance abuse journey at the young age of 12 years old, she came to a place of complete desperation to be free from it. Miranda is an amazing example of how God takes our messes and turns them into our messages. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I really would love to start exploring this 12 years old piece that is in your intro and your bio. I have a 13-year-old son, and I couldn't imagine that being the situation, yet I know that it happens. And so tell me about that. You started drinking at the age of 12 years old. That's correct?
Yeah. So I'm from a small town, and that was the culture where we lived. 800 population, 800. I was in a class with 13 kids, and we were in the same classes all together through junior high and high school. And really, it wasn't frowned upon. It's a mining town, and that's just what you did to have fun. You were drinking and off playing in the mountains, four-wheeling, things like that. So it was just the normal thing to do.
Wow. So, and that was acceptable, like, to parents, or just kind of culturally, that's just what you guys did.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, like, your home life growing up and what that looked like.
Well, my parents were married up until I was 4 years old, and they had a really hard divorce. It was rough. Lots of fighting and, throwing things and screaming. And, I went to live with my mom. So they separated when I was 4. I went to go live with my mom, and my mom had struggled with addiction even before I was born. And so, living with her while she was, in her addiction was, really rough. I would see my dad every other weekend. He usually worked out of state because he was a miner. He was a hard rock miner, and he would be working places like Utah or Nevada. So I'd go stay summers with him, but I really only saw him every other weekend there for a while when I was a little kid, and he struggled with alcoholism too. And so, I was just around a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just kind of runs deep, like that substance abuse and addiction kind of runs in your family, I guess you could say, but it was modeled for you. It sounds like. So you started drinking at the age of 12. Talk to me about that journey, 12 years old to, I'm assuming it just progressed. Was it just alcohol? Talk to me a little bit about your addiction journey.
Yeah. So, I'd have to say, like, since my mom was lost in her addiction and I wasn't seeing my dad a lot, through my life, I was always, and my mom she was kind of mean. She was always put off by me and just like trying to do her own thing in her life. And so I was always trying to search for that love, right? And so 12 years old, I moved with my dad. Drinking is just a way of life for all of us. And so 12 years old, on the weekends, partying, drinking. So I was a blackout drinker, but it would only be on the weekends. And then it just kind of progressed. Every single weekend I'd want to drink. And then as I got older, it was honestly a way of life. I had smoked marijuana a few times, but in the small town, drinking was acceptable, but no other drugs were. And so I think that kind of saved me from becoming a drug addict, as well as an alcoholic at that young of an age.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what that journey looked like, but also just wanting to be loved by people and wanting to be accepted. And the alcohol kind of helped me with that. And it kind of also numbed that feeling, that forgotten feeling that I had when I was living with my mom and when I moved in with my dad too.
Yeah, you had some hurt and some childhood wounds. And so you were masking and treating symptoms with alcohol,
Yeah.
So you have 2 kids.
I do.
2 young adult kids, right?
Yeah.
And so did you, were you still drinking, when you had them? And talk to me a little bit about that and that journey.
Yeah. So when I graduated, like I said, I hadn't really used any other drugs beside marijuana. I think I had taken some prescription medications, opiates, a few times, but never was addicted to it. Then I graduated high school and met the father of my kids, who was an IV drug user. And so the first time I did meth was when I was 18. And then shortly after getting into that, I got pregnant with my son. And that was because he was born October of 2004. Sometimes my memory is so bad.
You're good.
Yeah. So he was born in 2004. So before he was born, we took off and I stayed with some family in New Mexico with his dad, and we got clean. And then we had him, and I just kind of fell right back into it. He was, their dad was drinking a lot and starting to dabble in meth again. And I just kind of followed suit in that. And it was pretty rough. But we'd be clean off and on. And then I got pregnant with my daughter, and she was born in June of 2006. And, we were together about 6 more months after that, and we separated. So kind of using on and off, but able to stay sober. And then when we divorced, I took the kids with me, and he was still kind of off in his addiction, and my alcoholism got really bad again. And then I started using, and then I met a guy. He was clean, sober, and really good to me, and we stayed sober for a few years.
Okay.
And then just falling back into the wrong friends, the not healing from past trauma, not having God in my life, all of that contributed, having zero self-worth, all contributed back to me falling back into addiction. And through that journey, I didn't use it around my kids, but I left them a lot. Yeah. And I'd been at that point probably to three 30-day treatment centers trying to get help, but they just weren't long enough. And I didn't, like I said, have God in my life.
Yeah. So you hadn't found God at that point. Mm-hmm. And you said you had a couple year stint of being clean, and you had gone to treatment, but weren't consistently, whether it be working a program or consistently in recovery, right? No. Just kind of trying to white knuckle and like get through or get over this. So,
and I was I was never not drinking either. So it wasn't even, I was clean off of drugs, but always drinking.
Always drinking. Yeah. Okay. So you are clean now.
Yes.
You're clean and sober. And, yes. So there had to have been a point in which something gave, right? Like you had to have gotten to some sort of point. Will you tell me about what happened when you met the Lord and what the catalyst was for you saying like, enough is enough and like getting into some recovery?
Yeah. My kids were, they were 8 and 9, I believe, and I was in a really unhealthy relationship. There was a lot of abuse of all kinds. And I went down to my last treatment center. But what happened was I was in a horrible depression. I was using, and my kids were miserable. I was with somebody who was not a healthy person. And so I came to a point to where I was ready to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. I had it planned out. I had planned to park my truck in the garage and leave it running. I was just like at the end. I don't do a whole lot of AA, but I know that there's something in the AA book that says, is something about being on the road where you can't continue to use, but you can't continue to not use. And so that point right there in the middle is a horrible place to be. And I couldn't wake up another day with it, but I couldn't wake up another day without it. And so I was sitting in the truck, and that's the first time I really felt God's presence in my life. I just had this thought that, who was going to find me and what about my kids? And I just kind of felt this like little spark in my heart. That's how I remember feeling. And I had my boyfriend at the time take me to the mental hospital. And so I stayed there for 3 weeks, then went down to my last 30-day inpatient treatment center. So my recovery date is 12/5/2018. And I spent 30 days down there and then went back up into the same relationship. Mm-hmm. So same relationship, but yet my kids did not want to be with me. They didn't come back to me. I was in, it was still very abusive. And he was also an alcoholic. And so I was in this hell for like 10 months. I was without my kids. I would have to go see them where they were at. They didn't want to be with me. I felt trapped. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone else, so I didn't really tell anybody what was going on. And then I had a lady that I met at one of the meetings around town, and she was like, "Did you ever hear about Union Gospel Mission?" And I had said, "I'm not homeless." And she was like, "Well, they have a life recovery program too." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know." So I went to their overview, and I liked what I heard. And so I feared that if my boyfriend found out I was leaving, he was going to hurt me. And so I made the decision in 2 days to just leave all my stuff behind and go. Wow. And that's what I did.
And so you went to the Union Gospel Mission, mm-hmm. and you enrolled in or entered their program, their recovery program.
Yeah.
And was it live-in?
Yeah, it's an 18 to 24 month residential program.
Okay.
And I entered October 15th of 2019.
Okay. So your sobriety date is December 5th.
Yeah.
But you entered October of like the next year. So almost a year later.
Yeah.
But you did stay clean that whole time. But you
entered the grace of God.
Yeah. I'm assuming white knuckling it, choosing every day to just not, however.
I don't know how I did it, because even my boyfriend had offered me money to go and use, because I think he kind of knew what was going to happen after I stayed clean long enough in that relationship. And so he was actually trying to get me to use,
to stay.
Yeah. And I failed so many other times, but like I said, I know that God was with me in those moments.
Wow. And so, so then you entered this program and you were there for 18 to 24 months. I mean, that's a good chunk of time. Like, and you didn't have your kids. I'm assuming they couldn't live there with you?
Yeah. So the boys age out at 11. And so my kids didn't want to go with me anyway. They saw me so unhealthy, and, they didn't trust me because I had let them down so many times. And so one of the hardest decisions, but one of the best decisions, was to let them stay where they were at, because they were healthy and happy with their aunt and uncle, whom I owe everything to. They're so amazing. And they've always wanted me to just get better and be a part of my kid's life. That's the only thing they ever asked me for. And so I had to choose. Like, it's almost like it's kind of selfless in a way, because you feel like, at the time, it doesn't feel selfless. At the time, it feels selfish that you're taking more time for yourself after you've already been away from them. But looking back on it now, choosing to let them, even though it was hard, was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure that they understand and thank you for it now, because you do have a relationship with them now, don't you?
Yeah.
Which, tell me about that. Tell me about, like, you kind of reconciling that with them, because they were young, kind of going through it. And now they're like 19 and 21 or 20, something like that. They're young adults. And so probably remember a lot. And also, these are the years, because my daughter's 19 as well. Our daughters were born the same year. That, like, I love having a relationship with her. I love walking alongside her, being her mom, but also being her friend, like, at 19 years old. And so tell me a little bit about that and kind of reconciling with your kids.
Yeah. So I told them I was leaving to UGM, and they were sad, but they had already been kind of disconnected, not really a whole lot of hope for me, And so I went, and it was a really hard first 6 months. I was talking to my counselor, who's now my friend, about it the other day, and just how depressed I really was to be without them, and really be clear-headed, and just like shame and guilt, which is why UGM is so wonderful. They're giving you time to heal through classes and connection and counseling. And so my dad, rested, like, bless his soul, he's passed now, but for those 2 years I was there, the first year before I had a car, he was bringing my kids to see me, like, every weekend, every other weekend, him and his wife. And so I got a chance to connect with them little by little, just by being with them, but them not forcing them to be with me. Jasmine, my daughter, stayed with me overnight, maybe 3 or 4 weekends, and that the whole time I was there. And so they knew I was trying, and they were also able to see me sober. And so that kind of started the reconnection. I graduated, I commenced from UGM June of 2021, and then moved into their aftercare housing next door to UGM. And then my daughter came to live with me. And so we just started connecting and really getting to know each other again. And she struggled. She really did. She had struggles with her own addiction stuff, and her own depression, and the trauma that she had been through because of what I had, because of my addiction. And so there was a lot to unpack and work through there, but we became very close. And then my son, who was still living 45 minutes away, I was still going to see him also on the weekends, and just building that connection back with him.
That's amazing. And now you all have a relationship. And what I think is amazing that I want you to tell the listeners is kind of the mess and the hard and all of the things that you walked through, while not pleasant, and terrible and tragic in some seasons, what God has used it for, and how He redeems your story. Because where do you work now? What do you do for a living?
I work at Union Gospel Mission now.
Yeah.
Yes. It's such a blessing. So after I graduated, they helped me get my CNA, and I worked at the hospital for a year. And then I worked with kids at the Children's Village in Coeur d'Alene for a year. And then ultimately knew that I wanted to be with UGM, because I'm so passionate about what their program did for me. And it was all free of charge.
Wow.
18 to 24 months, all donor funded. They don't accept government funding at all. They have thrift stores that employ the ladies and the men coming out of the program, because a lot of them have felonies, and so it's hard for them to get a job, and so they work at the UGM Motors and the UGM thrift stores. I mean, their aftercare housing is a third of the cost of what it lives to live outside of here. So I'm so passionate about it that I wanted to work back there. So there had been a few positions that I applied for that didn't really fit me, and then one did open up. And so now I'm what's called the Next Steps program coordinator. And so what I do is I meet the ladies right where they're at in their brokenness and give them an overview of the program and application. And then I oversee their interviews and their acceptance. And so that goes for a whole trimester. They're with me in the Next Steps program, stabilizing, and then I hand them off to the life recovery program that I went through.
Wow. You are the person that you needed back then, like you get to use the story that was written, and the narrative got to change, and you get to give God glory and do the very thing that helped get you clean, get your life back, get your kids and all of the things, and how absolutely beautiful that is. I just think that that's so amazing. I just know that, so you spoke at the Stories Unveiled conference in 2023, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that you were working for UGM at the time. But I mean, your story was amazing then. And then I remember when I found out that you were working there, it was like, what a full circle moment. How did that feel to be back where kind of your sobriety and health and recovery journey started?
It feels, when I got hired and started doing it, it just felt right. I felt peace. And I felt that God was using that ugly brokenness, that hard and just like stuff that nobody would ever be grateful for. Right. Like I got a chance to be grateful for it. And so that taught me a lot about, honestly being grateful for everything. Yeah. Instead of, or being grateful for what I have instead of what I don't have. And, I am grateful for my story. I wish that I could have done things differently so my kids didn't have to go through the trauma? Absolutely. Yes, but I couldn't continue to beat myself up over it, because that would have just led me right back to the same life. Yeah. And so, the healing part of it, the shame piece, for a long time, I was really scared to tell everybody the depths of the addiction part. I had been in the hospital for surgeries for infections for my IV drug use. I had been, homeless. I had been, it had gotten so bad that I just didn't want anybody to know the depths. And so being able to just speak about it, in hopes that it might help somebody else is a whole nother feeling all on its own. Yeah.
Well, and am I correct? And you, in addition to, your suicide plan and all of that, didn't you almost die at least once from like an infection?
Yeah. So, I had gotten an infection in my left hand, from my IV drug use, and, the shame of being an IV drug user, was a lot, but also living in a small community where everybody knew you, even people at the hospital. And so I kind of just waited to see if it would go away. Until I started going septic. And so my lips were turning blue, my joints were locking up. I had spent like 2 days in front of the heater, just knowing that it was getting really bad. And so I had an aunt that lived there, and I trusted her enough to show her. And she was like, we're going right now to the hospital. And so we drove. I don't really remember the drive much. And I kind of remember getting to the hospital, and that's when things kind of went black. But waking up 3 days later, and, my hand was bandaged, and family standing around my bed, and, like telling the doctor that I'm awake. And so that was pretty scary, because I knew then that they didn't know if I was going to wake up. They didn't know how it was going to be because the infection was so bad. And even then I told the doctors not to tell my family what it was. I knew that they weren't able to do that if I told them not to. They'd be breaking HIPAA, and so even then, and the doctor was just like, you got to tell somebody, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And I was just still so full of shame that I didn't. And I stayed 8 days in the hospital, and then I used in the parking lot on the way home.
Oh my gosh. The shame, it's definitely a shame cycle, right?
Yeah.
When you are living in such shame like that, it just keeps perpetuating the addiction. And
Absolutely.
that I think that goes for really any addiction. I know like pornography and sex addiction, which is something that I'm familiar with, does the same thing. It creates that shame cycle. And so it just sends you deeper and deeper into it. So, but what the enemy intended to literally kill you and destroy you, God so amazingly like turned it around. And I just love your story, especially because just the very thing that helped pull you out and helped you find the Lord and grow in your relationship with Him and helped build your relationship with your kids and restoration and healing and recovery and all of those things is the very thing that you now get to do to help other people. And I just think that that's so beautiful. And that the shame that you once walked in no longer has to be, that that you can live free of that shame. So I just think
Absolutely.
It's so beautiful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a journey, and I have the best relationship with my kids now. My son still lives, 45 minutes away, but I see him on the weekends. Not every weekend because he's always busy, but
and he's an adult.
Yeah, he's going to school to be a diesel mechanic. He's on his second year, and he just got married.
Oh,
and so
awesome.
I get to be a mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And then my daughter, she works at a coffee shop called Jitters in the Silver Valley, and she's managing now. And so, or she's moving up the management change. And then we see each other a lot, probably once or twice every couple weeks. And then being healthy and healing, I found a healthy relationship with a healthy man. And so that's something I'm really grateful for too, because I just didn't think I deserved it before. And I didn't think, I thought in my brokenness, I wasn't worthy of love in that way. And so to have somebody that's healthy and respect me and show me, unconditional love. And it's been really special.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. I love that. And I have to imagine that after years of not maybe having the healthiest, I'm assuming the healthiest, like romantic relationships, that entering into a healthy one is even as refreshing as it is, maybe a little scary, because it's new, right? And it's different. But how amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah. We've had some navigating to do for sure.
Yeah. And I'm assuming
nice.
he knows your story and, all of that. And so
I'm very blessed, and he's the one to say, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
He knows the story and, wants to reassure me. And it's a really nice feeling. It's an odd feeling, actually. Like, what's really going on?
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, that's amazing. Well, I just love your story. I so appreciate you. I want to ask you one last question. In light of your story and anybody who might be listening to this episode, what would you tell a listener who is stuck in that shame cycle of addiction, who is like, I don't want anybody to know the depth of my addiction or my struggle, and wading through, especially alcohol and drug abuse? What would you say to them?
Thinking back at myself in those times, I would say you're not alone. And there's hope. And there are places and there are people that want to help you. Yeah. And get rid of the shame. That's what holds you down the most, is the shame. And, the life is good. Mm-hmm. And it can be good if you let it, and you deserve to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God is good. Yes. All the time. And that you're not alone. I think that's so important. You're not alone, and to release that shame, because, you're really the only one that holds on to that shame. The vast majority of people aren't going to hold that shame to you. Most people just want to see you healthy.
Yeah.
Right.
And we create stories in our own minds in that addiction piece too. And so with the embarrassment and the guilt inside anyway, it just feels like you're so alone and there's just no way out. My dad had asked me before he died, he said, because I told him this story, he knows everything about it and the abuse that went on in the relationship with the man that I was with. And I told him, some of the things that went on in the relationship. And he's like, why didn't you just tell me?
Yeah.
Why didn't you just come over? And in my mind, of course, I just was like, when you're in it and you don't want to bother somebody else and you don't want to wreck somebody else's life, that's how you feel. Mm-hmm. And you're ashamed and you don't want people to know, like, there's that piece that, like, you just can't. But when he said it to me, I thought it's just that simple. Just reach out. But in the moment, it's just not. It's just so hard.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Miranda, for sharing your story and for just being vulnerable and being willing to kind of step out of fear or worry of shame or any of those things, what others might think, but that just kind of stepping into what God's called you to do. And that's to just help other people in your same situation. And what better person to do that than somebody that's literally walked it, and that you are living, breathing proof that any situation can be redeemed. And I just really appreciate you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation on the Stories Unveiled podcast. We would love it if you would leave us a rating or a review. If you would like to learn more about Stories Unveiled and our events, go to storiesunveiledconference.com or follow us on Facebook or Instagram at storiesunveiled_. The Stories Unveiled podcast is created in partnership with KTSY and Barefoot Media Ministries. For more encouragement and other podcasts, visit ktsy.org. Have an incredible day and go live unveiled.